evening to everyone present here today. I'm Ramya T. Karur, manager at IndoUSrare. Thank you for joining us today for the Fireside Chat, um, which is exploring wellness, connection, and integrative care. It is my pleasure to warmly welcome you all to the webinar. Here is a look at the main agenda. Where we will start the event with the introduction of IndoUSrare, followed by introduction to speakers and fireside chat. The fireside chat will be moderated by Dr. Harsha Rajasimha, who is founder and executive chairman of IndoUSrare, in an engaging discussion with Shay Beider, who is a founder and CEO of Integrative Touch, as they engage in a thought-provoking discussion on wellness, connection, and integrative care on rare diseases. And it will be followed by a poll and a close remarks by Dr. Harsha. Before we start this session, we would like you to remind everyone about the house rules as well. Where the session is being recorded and may be shared on our websites and social media channels for those who are unable to attend live. Please keep your microphone muted throughout the session to minimize the background noise, and we'd also encourage you to submit your questions at any time using the Zoom QA or chat feature. Before we begin today's event, I would like to give a brief introduction to our organization. IndoUSrare was founded with a vision to address the significant gaps in global equity and access to clinical trials for rare diseases and treat all rare diseases by 2050. We are a non-profit 501(c) charity organization based out of Virginia, US, and we work to combat rare diseases by fostering cross-border research, collaborations, data sharing, and clinical trials globally. The key problems we are trying to address here is severe lack of global diversity in clinical trials and underrepresentation of Indian diaspora in rare disease database, and little engagement and inclusion of rare disease research and therapy development. IndoUSrare aims to tackle this problem through our mission of building collaborative bridges through the Eastern and Western hemispheres to increase diversity at the global level. Under this mission, we connect by rare disease patients in India, USA, and globally, collaborate, and also collaborate, connect, and transform, accelerate, and transform. We connect rare disease patients and families across India, US, and United States, and collaborate with patient organizations, researchers, and clinicians. We also accelerate and transform through research policy and equitable access to therapies and outcomes for rare disease communities globally. Our patient-centric programs is there to we currently operate 6 patient-centric programs where patient concierge, it's a technology-enabled patient concierge program which connects patients with clinical trials, specialist patient organization, and educational resources. To date, we have received around 225 plus patient requests, and we are representing more than 90 rare diseases. And the other program is the Patient Alliance, where we are currently a coalition of 69 patient organizations across 4 continents, and connecting patient groups in the United States, India, and other low-income countries. The other programs that we have is the research program, where it includes research core and several grant-funded research and educational initiatives. Education and awareness programs, where we organize educational webinars, fireside chats, Rare Disease Day events, Art for Rare, Road for Rare, and participate in conferences and community engagement activities. We also have an advocacy program where we actively participate in national and international advocacy initiatives to improve policies and access to rare disease community. And the last program is Corporate Alliance program, this program collaborates with pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies to promote equitable and affordable access to rare disease therapies. We pursue our mission through five key approaches, uh, where we have the five key approaches are learned, where through expert-led webinars, fireside chat, global conferences, expert speaker sessions, and clinical insights. And we also engage by building an informed community through awareness campaigns, Rare Disease Day activities, social media outreach, and community discussions. The other key approaches are we collaborate by connecting the ecosystem through our patient alliance, Bridging Rare Summit, and patient concierge program. And we also advocate by amplifying every patient voice through policy dialogues, government engagement, and public awareness campaigns and other global advocacy initiatives. We also believe in empowering by creating future leaders through our internship program, mentorship, and volunteer opportunities. So this slide introduces our leadership team, where we have board members and advisory board members. And the other slide is of our dedicated staff and interns and volunteers whose passion and commitment drive our mission forward every day. We are also proud of the impact that we have made together till now, where we have supported around 225 plus patients and connected over 20,000 patients and families, published more than 50 scientific publications, participated in 43 global events, established over more than 43 global partnerships, mentored more than 100 plus interns, and engaged over 200 stakeholders, where we have successfully raised approximately 600K USD to advance our mission. We also have some of the upcoming events which I would like to highlight here. So the first event is the Pitch for Rare, where it is an innovative platform. Pitch for Rare is an innovation platform dedicated to supporting biotechnology startups to developing groundbreaking diagnostic therapeutics, research tools, and patient support solutions for rare disease. This year, Pitch for Rare will take place twice, where we are one is a virtual event on September 23rd, and the other one is an in-person event in Bengaluru on December 13th. We have successfully mentored another program this year where we have mentored over 100 interns ranging from high school students to medical graduates. Our summer cohort is currently underway, and applications for our September cohort are now open. Interested students can apply using the link shared in the chat. So, and the other events that I would like to highlight is the Indo-US Bridging Rare Summit, which is our flagship event launched in 2023, and where every year we are alternating between India and United States, bringing together global leaders in rare disease research, healthcare, patient advocacy, industry, and policy making. This year, the summit will be hosted in Bengaluru in collaboration with SIAMG and SMRM and NIMANS. We are also excited to host the Bridging Rare Gala on November 8 at the Hilton Performing Arts Center, Manassas, Virginia. How we are always looking for collaborators, and we are always happy to partner with individuals and organizations who share our vision. We welcome strategic donors and sponsors to help scale our programs, foundation and academic institution to strengthen our collaborative research, researchers and clinicians to join our research core, and passionate volunteers and interns to become part of our growing community. So with this, now we would like to, launch a poll with the audience. And this is the brief house rules that I already mentioned earlier. Shazan, would you like to launch the poll for the attendees now?
Hi everyone, can you see the poll on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, the responses are trickling in.
I think we'll just end the poll now. Oh, okay, we have a timer.
Great. We had 76% participation. And we have a good mix of patient, caregiver, healthcare professional, students, researchers, and some from industry and patient advocacy. Good collaboration with Integrative Touch, with almost 50-50 with respect to social media, from where everybody learned about the event. So that's great. So 82% participation, that's great. So we'll end the poll and share results. Is everybody able to see the poll results on the screen? Great. Yeah, so as we see a good mix of persons living with a rare disease, parents, caregivers, healthcare professionals, academic researchers, students. There's a good number of students on the call, mostly from the summer internship program, so that's great. And some industry advocacy participation. You all learned about the event through social media, email, newsletter, and other channels. So thank you for participating in the poll, and let's move into the next segment of today's event.
Yes. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Harsha Rajasimha, who is our founder and Executive Chair for IndoUSrare and Jiva Clinical Trials. So, Dr. Harsha, over to you.
Thank you, Ramya, for a wonderful overview of IndoUSrare and the various programs that you and our staff members are managing and scaling nicely with a lot of collaborators. So let's move to the next slide. So I'm really excited today to welcome Shay Beider, who is our guest for the Fireside Chat on a very exciting organization, Integrative Touch. I like the two words here. I'm sure they are very intentionally chosen words, which bring the integrative aspect of medicine and alternative medicine, as well as the human touch that we all need for care and empathy. So welcome, Shay, to this Fireside Chat today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I appreciate the invitation, Harsha. It's a joy.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. And know you come with a amazing background, and everybody has a story behind who they are and why and how they got to where they are today. And so I'd love to start off with you sharing your story and how you got into integrative touch and where we are today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And I can even share a little bit here with a few slides. So Integrative Touch, it really all began because of one little girl in the hospital. I was a pre-med student at UCLA in Los Angeles, and I was watching a little girl as she was about to go in for surgery, and she was really frightened and alone. And something in my heart said, oh, it just doesn't have to look this way. There's got to be a way that we can accompany children when they're having these frightening experiences. And so that child really, I consider the founder of the organization because she birthed what became an NGO, a nonprofit organization that's focused on helping to end isolation in illness and transform trauma through togetherness. And so today we're able to, let me just see if my slide will advance here. It's going to go forward, but it doesn't seem to want to move. Let's see what's happening. There we go. Today we're based in the United States in Southern Arizona, but we have national and international programs. We offer different kinds of integrative medicine. So that's where the word integrative comes from in our name, which is kind of lifestyle and holistic medicine, sometimes called world medicine, right? Bringing in things like Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, things like meditation, acupuncture, and a variety of different mental health and trauma-informed therapies. And we provide those both in person at a healing center that we have in Southern Arizona, but also a lot of what we offer is online. And right now we're actually offering in particular a series specifically for caregivers. It's in development. So we wanted to offer this with really just an opportunity for you to submit interest if you have any interest in participating in a online support series for caregivers who are caregiving for a loved one like a child with a rare disease. This is an opportunity for you. And because we're a nonprofit, we do everything on a sliding scale. There's scholarships available. So do not let financial barriers in any way inhibit your opportunity to participate. You would work with 2 coaches who would actually help you as a caregiver to support you through some of the challenges that you might be facing. And so if you're interested, you can scan that QR code and we'll make sure to send that out to anyone who would like it after the series and fireside chat today as well. So that is one resource that I wanted to offer right from the beginning, because we really believe in providing support to caregivers. That's an essential aspect of our model. I would also like to just kind of kick off before we dive fully into the fireside chat conversation. I wanted to share just a little bit of information that will relate to the dialogue that we're going to be offering. So there was a wonderful book that came out. It's called Well-Being, the 5 Essential Elements. It's based on the Gallup polls that were conducted in more than 150 different countries. And that's why I like it, because it's a very significant data set. And so since our conversation today is looking at things like resilience and connection and well-being and how we survive hard things like caring for a child with a rare disease, I wanted to see a little, what are the core elements globally that relate to well-being? And as it turns out, there's really 5 core elements internationally that connect. Those are career well-being. This can be your professional career, but it can also be your work within the home if you're a caregiver, maybe caring for a child with an illness. There's social well-being, so the strength of our relationships, the love, our financial well-being, how we manage money and our economic life, our physical well-being, the quality of our health, our body, our energy, and then our community well-being, that sense that we have of participating in community groups and clubs, organizations, so that level of engagement. These are 5 core areas that, regardless of where you live in the world, these are all primary to your experience of well-being. So I wanted to use that to frame our conversation a little bit today. And I also wanted to share what I think is a seminal conversation, as like a study that was done that is foundational for the conversation today as well. They think it's the longest running research study that's ever been conducted. It was started at Harvard. It's called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. You can look it up at adultdevelopment.org, I believe is the URL. It started in 1938, but what's interesting, because it's looking at well-being, is that what they found is that one of the most critical elements to long-term happiness, health, and well-being, and really a sense of thriving, are your relationships. So more than money, more than fame or status, more than, your fancy title that you have. Our relationships at the age of 50 are really what define our health at the age of 80. And that, single statement that came from Robert Waldinger, the director of the study, and his famous TED Talk is where he said that, has really caught hold because it shows us the importance of navigating our relationships. And so I thought it would be valuable to start there. The other data I thought was valuable as we start the conversation is this idea that, we think of healthcare systems, whatever country you're in, as where most of healthcare happens. As it turns out, there was a fascinating Canadian study actually that was done that shows that's not quite true, that actually the vast majority of care happens by caregivers, which is typically friends, family, and loved ones. About 60% of the care happens by our caregivers, our friends, family, and loved ones. The other 30% is us taking care of ourselves, right? So we're, managing our own care. And when you think about it, many people who are joining who have a child with a rare disease, you're in that 60%. You're a caregiver taking care of a loved one. And really only about, when we think of hospitals and urgent cares, only about 3% is happening in those clinical spaces. So a lot of care happens in communities, and that's something I thought was important to highlight because that's why caregivers need so much support in their communities, right? That's really an essential part of what we're discussing today. And obviously, there's vast cultural differences. Every caregiving family and culture is responding to their own unique needs, and it's all very relevant based upon where you live. So, because I know we have in particular people in both India and the United States that are listening to and joining this conversation today, I just wanted to highlight a few data points, again, as a foundation. So there's somewhere between 138 and 273 million family members that are providing care in India. About twice as many women, you'll see this also is a factor, a gender difference in the United States as well, that are providing unpaid care compared to men. And women also spend about twice as much time on caregiving daily than men. In India, daughters-in-law and daughters tend to bear the highest burden. So that's where the burden is often falling. And over 60% of caregivers are experiencing things like exhaustion and anxiety. And you'll see some of the trends in the US also include things like depression and sleep deprivation. And so you'll see these are common themes of struggle that people face. And then you also see this element of poverty. In rural areas in India, 97% of unpaid caregivers live in poverty. That's an extraordinary number. When we look at the US, we actually see a lot of similarities, that more caregiving is provided by women, primarily about 2/3, that many of the caregivers in the US are working a full-time job, about half, and many are spending 20 hours or more a week on their caregiving responsibilities. They're often the sole providers of care in the US, so they don't have another family member who's contributing. They're not receiving formal support. And as I mentioned, they're experiencing not only sleep and depression difficulties, but we also see the number one complaint among caregivers in the US is that they're not getting enough emotional support. And as a result, are having a really hard time finding balance. And the third element is this financial assistance is needed, that there's just more. And you see that in India too, right, with high levels of poverty. So about 88% of family caregivers in the US are saying that they're not receiving sufficient support. And so that's really why an organization like Integrative Touch exists, is to provide that support to caregivers like those parents who are supporting a loved one who's going through a rare disease. So I wanted to just start with that. I can stop sharing there, Harsha, and hand it back over to you. But that was my effort to just kind of kick the fireside chat conversation off for us.
Thank you, Shay. That was fantastic data and story, and your journey so far is very inspiring. Thanks for doing what you do. But I want to start off touching on one point that you made in your presentation, which is relationships. That's such an important part of any human health and well-being. And we see babies that are very early in their after post-birth, when they start smiling, the bonding that they have and the comfort that they get with their parents, grandparents, they smile the most after day 40. And we see that bonding makes them happier and feel well comforted, safe. And so that smile decreases as we keep growing older and older. And it seems like a typical baby smiles 400 times a day, and a typical adult does not smile every day. Not quite as extreme. There are a few exceptions, but I think definitely the number of times we smile goes down drastically. And so what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, what's fascinating is that we are designed relationally. We are relational beings from the beginning. And I want to highlight a few points of that. When we're a baby, you mentioned like the importance of bonding and touch, right? And we know that oxytocin is released, like when a mother or father is nurturing and caring for and touching their child. And that oxytocin is a very beneficial hormone for both the parent and the baby, right? What else do we know? We know that our nervous systems actually develop through touch. And that's why when you see babies in orphanages or in isolation who aren't experiencing enough touch and loving touch through those important key relationships, that their nervous system actually does not develop properly. And why is that? It's because the myelination, so the sheaths around each neuron in our body, those sheaths are actually formed by touch. So when we touch or massage an infant or a baby, we're literally helping their nervous system to develop. And then secondarily, another piece that I think is just fascinating is that when you're holding a baby to your chest and you're comforting them, they're actually learning something called co-regulation. Co-regulation is how our nervous system starts to begin to do things like manage our respiratory rate, manage the way that our heart is beating. So a little baby, an infant, actually learns how to regulate their own heart rate, their own respiratory rate, like core biologic functions through that co-regulation of touch and love from a loving caregiver. And that's extraordinary because that shows that human design is entirely foundationally relational from the beginning. And I think that's just fascinating.
Indeed, very fascinating. I see a number of questions already popping in, so please keep them coming. And let's keep the focus on rare diseases, integrative wellness, health, both for patients as well as caregivers in the context of rare diseases, US, India, globally. And so keep bringing those questions, and we will have time towards the end, last 10-15 minutes for more discussions. Let's dive into the journey itself, Shay, in terms of the patient journey, emotional roller coaster that people go through when they first receive the diagnosis, then knowing whether there is a treatment and what treatment options exist, and if not, what research, clinical trial options may exist, or sometimes even worse, absolutely no treatment, which is not infrequent in the case of rare diseases. And many times patients are told, go home and wait it out. Sorry, we have nothing that we can do for this disease or for you. So what's your experience been with patients and caregivers as they go through this emotional roller coaster?
Yes, obviously it's very distinct to each individual, but there are common themes, and there are also things that I think are very helpful. So one common theme is very often initially there's a shock, right? And we know that at first that sense of almost a denial, like, could this be happening? How is this happening? How did this happen? Why did this happen? that those types of questions initially are very normal. And when you look at the different stages of grief that are now pretty well documented, we see that there's a trajectory which tends to start with feelings of shock and disbelief, that there can be cycles of depression, that there can be experiences of anger. And now they've added kind of an additional stage to our understanding of grief that also includes this idea of meaning making. And part of how we get there eventually, right, on this trajectory of how we process really hard things is with two key points that I want to discuss on the talk today. One is this idea of resilience. So there was a woman that I think captured this idea really beautifully. She was a Holocaust survivor, and she said, "I'm like a red rubber ball, like a little hard red rubber ball. The harder you throw me to the ground, the higher I bounce." And she took those most devastating experiences in her life where she felt like she was thrown to the ground, and she allowed them to transform her in a positive way. That's not an easy thing to do, right?
Bounce
And
back.
right, extremely difficult. And we
Yeah.
know that that core idea of resilience is what allows people to do that. But what she's also describing is something that's now documented in the literature, which is called post-traumatic growth. And I want to share that because just knowing about post-traumatic growth makes you more likely to experience it. I interviewed Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, who's one of the world's happiness experts, and he talked about the importance of understanding this idea of post-traumatic growth because it's actually then what allows you to experience it. So what is post-traumatic growth? It's this idea that positive change can emerge from profound struggle and even trauma, right? That we can have a child with a rare disease, that we ourselves can have a rare disease, that we can have these incredibly difficult life experiences and somehow utilize that to help us to grow. And now we're seeing that this whole field is an emerging field, that people actually have the capacity to experience that level of resilience. What I've seen from a lived patient and also parent/caregiver experience is that to get there, you very often do need some sort of inner sense of some element of spirituality beyond the material self. That can be defined very differently by different people and in different cultures and with different faith and religious backgrounds. But typically, there's some kind of anchor that takes us beyond just the physical self to some sense of there's something deeper that is this spiritual anchor that helps people to move past those high levels of suffering. So I just wanted to introduce a few of those concepts in the conversation.
Yeah, those are all amazing concepts to be aware of. And it reminds me of Patch Adams, the Robin Williams flick from 1998.
Yeah.
And later it was also remade into a Bollywood movie in India, which is quite famous as well, called Munna Bhai MBBS. So,
Wonderful.
which had a bit of a masala there. But it really told the story of how doctors and healthcare professionals can really have an impact, a meaningful impact beyond just the chemistry and of the drugs that they give and the biochemistry. There is also this touch, emotion, and caregiving, and making someone feel comforted with their touch, which is often hard in a telemedicine and digital era. And touch still has its own value, like the oxytocin that you mentioned and all the other chemicals that get released as a result of this as well.
Yes. And, it's interesting. I interviewed a gentleman, his name is Dr. Richard Boyatzis. He wrote a book on the science of change and how people actually change. And what he talked with me about, so for example, let's say you're going through an experience, you have a rare disease or you have a child with a rare disease, and your suffering is very great and you want to create some change in your life around that suffering, right? And you're trying to figure out how to approach that. What he found is that the science is fairly clear that we change by getting ourselves into what's called a parasympathetic state. It's a nervous system state where we're in more rest and digest. It's a state of greater relaxation that we don't actually change from a state of fight or flight, which is more of a fear-based state. When we're in that state, we're scared, and it's very hard for us to create meaningful, lasting change. So then Dr. Boyatzis did a very interesting thing, which is he evaluated all of the peer-reviewed studies in journals that had at least 5 or more solid publications that showed how do people get into that parasympathetic state so that they can change, so that if they're wanting to make meaningful change, how do they do it? And what he found is there's several practices that are now confirmed by the literature. And I think some of our listeners might want to know about these practices, whether you have a rare disease or you're caring for someone with a rare disease. And some of these will be very familiar. Meditation. Meditation is one of those practices. Yoga. Yoga is one of those practices. Tai Chi is one of those practices. Prayer. He always says it's important. It needs to be to a loving God. If it's to a vengeful God, in the literature, it doesn't stand up. So interesting caveat around prayer.
Yeah.
Modest exercise. So not to the point where you're really stressing your system, but just moderate exercise. So not extreme. Feeling hopeful about the future. So finding something, even in a great adverse life experience, finding something you can be hopeful about. Helping others who are less fortunate. He talks about, because he's older at this stage in his life, caring for the elderly or anyone in need actually can activate that parasympathetic state. Being in a loving relationship, so having a partnership that's loving. Having a pet, if you're able to have a pet that you care for, that activates that response. Laughter and playfulness, so finding opportunities for laughter and play. Playing music or dancing is also a key. And the final one, these are all research-based, is walking in nature. So getting out as much as you can into the natural environment and connecting with the natural world. So for everyone who's listening, who's saying, what does the science tell me that I can do to feel better right now? Those are things that we know are effective, that we're seeing confirmed in the literature.
Wow, you hit a lot of important and good points there, Shay, with yoga, breathing techniques, which is so important. I recently had an opportunity to visit one of the yoga gurus, Sri Ravi Shankar, and I was, although I was aware of his existence and millions of followers, I just was amazed to learn that there's more than 600 million people who have gone through the yoga program. That's almost 10% of the population. So it's phenomenal what yoga gurus are doing good in this regard. And one important thing it stuck in my mind is breathing out is so important for all of us. And maybe it's a reminder for all of us to take a moment and breathe out. Right? We often breathe in, which is a indication of passion. We are taking in, sucking in, right? And this passion is equally important. Many times we want to help someone, we hold them too tight, right? We care for them, we love them. And by just letting them go a little bit, let it loose, breathe out, let it go, right? Let it be. And doing that at least on occasions or cyclically, periodically, is so important, which most of us often miss. We are all good at holding tight, but we are not good at letting go or letting loose and breathing out. So that I thought was very sticky in my mind.
Absolutely. You know, there's so many breathing practices, pranayama, within the yogic tradition, right? There's one that we do often in the West that I think is kind of a fun one. It's called the physiologic sigh. And I'll just demonstrate it because it's so portable. You can take it with you anywhere. You breathe in through your nose fully. Then you take one more little inhale through your nose and then a full exhale through your mouth. And that's the pattern. So it's full inhale through the nose, little extra sip, and then full exhale through the mouth. And it's really that powerful exhale that helps us to rebalance, because when our systems are stressed, we tend to breathe in a very shallow way.
Yeah.
And that significantly changes the stress response and the physiologic response in our body. And what's fascinating is not only can we control our autonomic nervous system through conscious breathing, which is essentially what we're describing, right? These breathing practices are a form of conscious breathing, right? Bringing consciousness to the breath itself helps to control the autonomic or automatic portion of the nervous system. And it's one of the only ways we can directly interface with that system. So it's very powerful for reducing stress. Another key idea for stress reduction that I think is valuable for the people joining us today is Kelly McGonigal's work on the stress response, that if you perceive stress as negative, so if your mindset around stress is that it is negative, it will have a more well-documented negative physiologic response in the body.
Yeah.
And her own research shocked her, because she saw that people who experienced a mindset that stress is negative actually died more from stressful events than people who saw something that she calls the challenge response, which is this idea that a stressful experience is actually inviting my system to rise to a challenge. And so if you think of that with a rare disease, either from the parenting perspective or the patient perspective, how is this rare disease inviting my system to rise to this most, in some cases, difficult and what may feel impossible, challenging moment in my life? How can I rise so that somehow this can be transformative and meaningful, even if it's deeply painful and personal? Yeah. And that understanding of a challenge response actually shifts biologically the stress response in the body. And Dr. Kelly McGonigal's work really shows that in the literature. It's fascinating.
Indeed. And that's where I get excited about this wisdom-based medicine, the ancestral wisdom, the 5,000-year-old yoga breathing techniques, which people have demonstrated over generations that it works. And at the same time, we may lack scientific evidence. And the evidence-based medicine is a 150-year-old industry and right. still taking shape. And there is biophysics, which is involved in this yoga and breathing, which involves essentially supplying oxygen to all parts of the body and all the organs, right? So the air gets stuck and sucked up in there, and we need to release that and get it out. And I'm sure there is a lot more science and biophysics and whatnot involved to explain all of that, but it may take another 1,000 years for us to figure it out, the science behind this wisdom, which we know works. But
exactly, that's right. That's why they call them wisdom traditions, right? Because they've carried this wisdom over thousands of years.
Absolutely. Now, thanks, Nisha, for posting the emotional journey map that Shay talked about, but we also had collaborated with this organization, Rare Givers Coalition, with Crystal O'Loughlin. And they did a fantastic job of gathering information from a number of caregivers across the world and published a emotional journey map of how some people are left in an island and some are more connected, and what the roller coaster journey looks like. So for those interested, you can download the journey map. Now, you also touched on faith, Shay, and many times the patients and caregivers get stuck in this emotional island of why me, why my child, why did this happen, what did I do wrong, feel of guilt. And many of these difficult questions often are very difficult to answer or find any scientific logical answers. And that's where faith has been helpful to many patients and caregivers that we interact with. And the faith also is part of giving hope, right? So a belief that there is something supernatural above and beyond human and science and medicine that does control all of us, and that there is some miracle to happen. And we have seen those miracles do happen more often than we think. And we have seen them, whether it's the story of John Crawley saving his daughter with enzyme replacement therapy in a single lifetime, and many patients suffering from many lysosomal storage diseases, or Emil Kakis with ultragenics, or many other people, mothers and fathers who have fought for their kids and babies and did the impossible. What do you observe with respect to faith, and what do you see play that in integrative touch?
Yes, I think a sense that we can come to understand is that if we see ourselves entirely as a material existence, right? The body is a machine, we're having a mechanical experience, it's entirely physiologically rooted, and it's a material existence. There is great suffering when there is loss and pain and illness and death. If we see ourselves as a spiritual being having a human experience, then it's a very different framing, because even the ideas of death and loss themselves get framed in a larger context, right? And that larger context is that there is a fundamental spiritual being that goes on beyond this physical existence. We may not know all the details of that, or we might have a particular faith-based understanding of what does happen. But in my experience, because I've worked with people of all faiths, agnostics, atheists, every background, if you have some kind of spiritual understanding, however you define that to be, that transcends you beyond the limitations of a purely material physiologic world, and says that there is something immaterial that's rooted in a spiritual self, that is what enables people to navigate suffering from an entirely different lens, because it's a much broader perspective.
Yeah, well said. So let's take next couple minutes to touch upon maybe a few case studies, Shay, examples of either caregivers, parents, or patients who contacted Integrative Touch, and what kind of impact. So we have an understanding of how Integrative Touch helps in what type of contexts and situations, which I'm sure are quite varied.
They are quite varied. So one of the ways that we've been helping just these last couple of months, and we've done this for, now it's been since 2009, we offer different kinds of retreats and camps for families. So one of the things we noticed is that there's this gap in communities where families that have a child with serious illness don't often have a place for that child to participate in activities, things like camps, extracurricular activities. So in our own community, we've created those programs. So those are some of our in-person programs that we're offering, which I think are very valuable. And those are valuable in any community, right? Bringing together groups of people that have similar experiences, so young people can engage, interact, and whether those are teenagers or younger children. We're also developing, as I mentioned, this new online caregiver series that's specifically designed to help people that are caregiving. We also have another online program, because I know we have a lot of international listeners, that's designed for individuals themselves. So if they have a rare disease and are trying to figure out, how can I be more resilient? How do I manage my stress response? Can I actually engage this idea of post-traumatic growth in my life? We have an online series. We run those. It's a 10-week curriculum. And then there's another 10 weeks where you can do integrative wellness sessions online to support individuals and caregivers that are experiencing illness and disease. And if you're interested in any of those programs, that QR code, which we can pop up again, is a good way to just express your interest. And like I said, we do things with a scholarship sliding scale, so don't let money be the obstacle.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing those, Shay. And I'm sure people listening in can share that with the rest of their communities and caregiver groups that can potentially benefit from this. And I love this whole notion of integration or integrative aspect of this, bringing wisdom and evidence and science and knowledge from the thousands of years together in this fashion. And that's where I personally feel the Indo-US mission, which is really East and the West,
Yes,
can have a good marriage, happy marriage there. And
exactly. And I think you see that, right? In where East meets West, we also see that is where the whole is created, right? Where when we all come together, you see that in the yin yang symbolism, right? We see that in the polarity that is often described in life, right? The sun, the moon, the night, the day. And we also see that in our brains, the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere. And we're not whole until we bring all of this together. So, Western medicine is not strong unless it is compatible and working in dynamic relationship with Eastern medicine. It is a full world medicine that the world needs right now. And I completely agree, Harsha. That's why we want to have these kinds of conversations because we need all of it. We need the wisdom traditions and we need the science and evidence-based medicine, and we need them to come together with respect and dignity.
yeah, absolutely. And in that context, I often remind myself and everybody on the uh, role of mind in all of human diseases. So the National Institute for Mental Health and Neurological Sciences in India has moon as the logo of the National Institute for Mental Health. And it's not just mental health, but it's also for the overall health of the human, depends on how the mind works. And as you pointed out at the beginning, relationships have a big impact on the mind, which is a big part of whether the mind is happy, has any regrets, guilt, and all of that gets stuck there. And we know someone with a lot of fear is prone to have certain type of disease. Someone with a lot of stress, anger, these are all emotional state of mind. And those who tend to keep calm and happier, more positive, tend to not have many of these health conditions. And that's the most difficult thing to control is the mind, right? We know that as well. So,
Yeah. And if you ever question, do your beliefs matter? Is the mind really powerful? Just turn to the placebo effect. Every randomized controlled clinical gold standard trial in the US that uses a pill is using the placebo effect because it's so powerful. They have to like screen it out in the study, right? You have to try to remove that placebo effect because it's so powerful. That is the power of the mind.
yeah.
So we know that science has to account for the power of the mind because that is the saliency of it, right? So yes, let's use it for good. Let's use it to heal. Let's use it to help ourselves in these hard situations.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue to open up for question and answers and bring in Dr. Julia Gleize, who is joining us here, I believe from Paris, France. Julia?
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for your invitation. Delighted to be here and to have heard Shay. Really wonderful. So yes, and I'm in Paris.
Absolutely. And we know you are world renowned for your work in integrative medicine, and you have published a book recently with the Foundation Ipsen. So we can share that with this community. And also, if you can give us a glimpse of what you are doing in integrative medicine and your perspective of this conversation today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about the book, which is co-authored with the president of Foundation Ipsen, Dr. Professor James Levine. And there it is free for downloading. The ebook is completely made available, thanks to the Foundation's work, to rare disease patients and their families, caregivers. There's a lot of attention given to caregivers in the book because our understanding of increasing the well-being is an entirely family affair. I'm a family physician to begin with. And so we really like to see not only the patient in their entirety, but in the entirety of the family unit as well. And we know very well that in rare disease situations that there's a lot of effect, as we've been talking about, on the whole surrounding family unit. So the book is a practical guide, very easy to peruse and find very practical little tips to be able to bring some of these different methods, different approaches into your life for yourself and for loved ones. So it's very simple and accessible, and that was the intention. And so in it, we talk about a lot of the things that we were mentioning that are very important for well-being in all contexts, because of course. It's not the fact that somebody or somebody's loved one is going through a rare disease that really is that much of an exceptional situation. And I think sometimes that's important. As difficult as things are, it is part of the human experience. And I like what Shay was saying about the spiritual being that is having a material experience. And so in that sense, really, rare diseases exacerbate the needs of the general population at large, that everybody needs to be listened to better and have a more personalized approach and a more complete global approach to their health. And so these are some of the concepts that we broach in very accessible terms. To answer your question about what I'm up to in Paris these days, the answer is lots of things. Amongst others, I am medical director at Institut Raphael, which is Europe's leading and premier integrative health center. It was originally started by oncologists, and we're opening up to chronic diseases and rare diseases and pediatric populations as well, which is so important for this space. And so I'm helping them usher this into being. Europe is somewhat behind integrative medicine. I trained not far from Shay with Dr. Andrew Weil, who's one of the pioneers of integrative medicine also in Arizona. And Europe has some resistance. They like to have their worlds quite separate. And so we're trying to usher in this understanding that they're not mutually exclusive. And that's a work that needs to be done on a policy level, on an education level, on a clinical level, and of course on research. And I'm also a researcher looking at AI in medicine and how that can help bridge some of these time gaps that people are having with the difficulty that doctors sometimes also feel. Well, I've just spent 15 years in school. Why are you telling me there's all this other stuff that I now need to learn how to do to treat my patients? So maybe AI has a role there. And that's some of the things that we're looking into.
Thank you so much, Julia, for sharing that and putting all of your wisdom into this book, which is easy to access and download, which I already downloaded a copy of for free. So encourage all of you to take a look at that. And we have a couple minutes left, so let's take a couple questions. And I see one from Rameshwar Lal and Shay. The question is, what are the ways to collaborate and start a clinical trial for hereditary spastic paraplegia, SPG84 mutation in PI4KA gene? How would you answer that question?
How would I answer that question of how to collaborate for a clinical trial? Well, I feel like this is more your domain than it is mine, Harsha.
Yeah.
So I would welcome your response.
I thought. Yeah, so let's talk about that, Rameshwar, offline. We will need to do some research to figure out who are the world's leading experts and where drug development programs might be for that particular SPG84 disease, and we can work on that together offline. Anyone likes to unmute yourself, ask a question to Shay or Julia today? I know Sabah Ahmed has a number of questions about ALS, which is a rare disease, very difficult to diagnose.
Yes.
And often gets misdiagnosed. Have you come across patients or caregivers with ALS in your experience, Shay?
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously a very painful process and very difficult side. You know, we tend to focus more on the emotional and the caregiving side and the human side, right? Like Julia was speaking to. And so that's honestly where my area of expertise is. Yeah.
So Sabah, I encourage you to reach out to Shay and Julia after this call and explore ways in which we could collaborate there as well. Any questions for Shay or Julia today?
Hi, this is Reena here,
Hi, Reena.
one of the board directors at IndoUSrare, and I just wanted to remind both of you, Shay and Julia, that sometimes caregivers are also patients,
Yes.
and how do you tackle that situation?
So difficult, right? It's being sandwiched between two realities, right? Where you're caregiving for someone else and for yourself. And I would say the way to look at it fundamentally is like spokes on a wheel, that you have to get many different spokes of support. Those can be friends, family, community resources, any kind of spoke that you can build to hold that wheel together is what will get you there. It's not something we can do alone. That level of, challenge requires community. It requires multiple people, multiple resources. So don't even think about trying to do that alone. Reach out, get resources, get help.
Very good point. I mean, I feel like sometimes caregivers forget about their own symptoms and they don't value, or they sort of minimize their discomfort because they are focused so much on caregiving.
Yes.
Yes, so true. And that's where the very often used metaphor from the airplane is used when they simply tell you that you need to put on your oxygen mask first
Yes.
before your child's, before your dependents, because you cannot help others if you have not first fed yourself. And that can be a useful way of reframing for some. For some, I find that actually puts all of the emphasis on their caregiving, and I'm only taking care of myself to be a caregiver. And in some examples and for some personalities, that's actually not what they need to hear. So again, and this sounds like a cop-out answer, but I think it's so true. We have to go back to what Shay was saying, what Harsha is saying, that's so important. And that's that personalization of really understanding and listening to who you have in front of you. And that it's not a patient or a caregiver, but it's an individual going through a completely individual experience that needs to be heard first and foremost, and then responded to in a human way.
Well, very well said.
Yeah,
Truly personalized, individualized therapy in that sense.
Yeah, thank you to both of you for bringing in such valuable perspectives and a great discussion today. Thank you.
Yeah, we are also up on time. So let's thank Shay Beider for joining us and sharing all her insights, and to Julia for her book. And we look forward to continuing this conversation. There were multiple topics, and each topic deserved its own fireside chat for half a day each. And so there is lot to unpack here, and hopefully it gave a good bit of topics to think about. And reach out to Shay, Julia, and us at IndoUSrare, and we are happy to facilitate any collaborations. So please be reminded that there is the Indo-US Bridging Rare Summit in Bangalore, India this year, December 11, 12, 13th. And those of you who might be interested in mitochondrial diseases, a conference in November 19, 2021, also in Bangalore. And it is at NIMHANS, the Mental Health and Neuroscience Institute that I was talking about. And so you'll meet a number of great scientists, doctors, caregivers, patients, researchers, and yoga gurus if you do visit India. So I encourage all of you to make a trip if you can. And we will also be hosting the Abby Mayer's Cushy Bridging Rare Gala in Virginia, November 8th. It's a Sunday at the Hilton Performing Arts Center in George Mason University campus. So invite all of you to join us at the gala as well. So with that, I'll hand it back to Shahzan or Ramya to close out the event. But join me in thanking Shay Beider.
Thank you, Harsha, and Jay and Julia and everyone. We would like to launch a poll, a feedback poll. If I can just uh, request everyone to wait for a minute. Shazan, would you like to?
Yeah. It's
to
up
the
now.
poll. Yeah.
Okay. So this poll is a bit interesting because we to get while we still have all of us here, and no pressure, be candid. And feel free to drop any suggestions for what you like to hear on this or similar topics, so we can bring in the right focus in the next event. So we have 40% participation so far. So let's see if we can get a few more to respond. All right, 60% participation. A couple more. 62. All right, so ending in 10 seconds. Great. Thank you. So ending now, 75% response. So thank you for all the feedback, and we would like to hear what else you may have feedback either now in the chat, or you can email us, and we'll be happy to keep getting better and bringing the right content to you. So Shahzan, Ramya, are we ready to close?
Yes, Harsha. Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Sure.
everyone. And thank you, Shay.
Thank you very much, Harsha.
Thank you, Julia, for joining us. Be in touch.
Thank you.
Bye.